Senator Young and I are going to start a second round of questions. Mr. Harris, Algeria has historically supported the Polisario Front, whose main goal is the independence of Western Sahara from Moroccan control. They regularly deliver arms, training, financial aid. The Biden administration has sought to revive the UN process on the final status of the Western Sahara, but at the same time, they haven't rescinded the Trump administration's policy of recognizing Morocco's claim of sovereignty over the territory. Do you perceive these two policies to be at odds? And what kind of progress do you think that we can make on trying to move forward concessions or actions that we would need from Algeria to resolve this longstanding crisis?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think that we have spoken very clearly to the importance of enabling a UN political process on Western Sahara to move forward, negotiations leading to a lasting and enduring resolution to this extremely difficult challenge developing over many years without further delay. I have had the good occasion to work very closely with the personal envoy of the Secretary General, Mr. de Mistura, as he works to intensify these consultations, and also to consult privately with partners, including Algeria, about how all players could lend their influence to the success of that UN political process. I believe there is a recognition about the fundamental challenges at play, and also the importance of ensuring that that political process is successful. Algeria certainly has a very important role to play in that conversation, and if confirmed, a central element of my efforts with the Algerian government will be to further intensify that dialogue so that that UN process could finally gain some traction.
Great, thank you for that. Mr. Lord, talk to us a little bit about U.S. Senegal security cooperation. Senegal is really critical to U.S. efforts, U.S. security efforts in West Africa. It's probably got the most competent security forces in the Sahel. Given the myriad problems facing Senegal's neighbors, what can we do to expand Senegal's positive security influence in the region? What are going to be the first, second, and third steps you're going to take and ask Congress to support on this mission?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. Indeed, we have a long history of cooperation with Senegal on security arrangements and assistance, and which has included professionalization of the forces so that they can engage in global stability operations. Senegal is on a security and diplomatic level engaged on the difficult problems in the Sahel, both through this West Africa sub-regional organization, ECOWAS, and through the United Nations. I think one of the key things that we can do is listen to the new government's ideas about how to approach this situation. They have intense interests in seeing a resolution. Many of our interests overlap with them. And so working together with them on a diplomatic plan, as well as providing additional support to their security forces. If confirmed, this will be a top priority in working with the new government on how to move this forward in West Africa, because we have very serious concerns, but also shared interests with Senegal.
Well, I also sit on both the Defense Appropriation Subcommittee and the Foreign Relations Subcommittee, so I look forward to your recommendations on how we can continue to support that cooperative relationship. Ms. Gavito, let's talk about the embassy. So we've got a request to establish a diplomatic travel support operation facility, a DTSOF. Tell me a little bit about how we make sure that that doesn't become the sort of new permanent normal. How do we stay on track to get an embassy back up and established? And while we are in this interregnum period where we've got this sort of temporary facility, how do we manage our risk tolerance to make sure that we are actually getting our diplomats who may be temporarily housed there out into the field to talk to people instead of just sitting in this facility and monitoring from inside high walls?
Thank you very much, Senator. I think that this is an extraordinarily important step forward, and I was remiss in responding to Senator Ricketts with the same. So much of what we do requires us to be present on the ground, and with so much at stake with Russia, with China, having a persistent presence there is absolutely key to having the flexibility, the agility to engage Libyans on all of these range of issues on a consistent basis. This decision to move forward with a persistent presence, affectionately called the DITSOF, came after 2.5 years of an increased tempo of short visits into Libya. Throughout that process, the Department of State has reviewed at every juncture the security to ensure that everything that is being done is done with an eye towards ensuring that our personnel on the ground are able to stay safe. Of course, that requires constant evaluation, and I think that that is fundamentally the answer to your question. There is no automaticity to any part of this process. At every juncture, I commit to this committee that we will continue, that I personally will continue to review the security on the ground, which remains complicated despite the fact that the 2020 ceasefire has largely held, to make sure that everything that we are doing to advance our mission there is again done with a prioritization of the security of our personnel. I'd like to, if I may, add that this commitment is extremely personal to me. Chris Stevens was a friend. I had dinner with him the week before he was murdered. It is never far from my mind. And as I said, I can only commit to you that as we move forward with engaging in Libya on a more sustained basis, and you're right, we can't sit behind walls. The Russian ambassador in Libya is using as a talking point, we are here and the United States is not. Right. It's all over the media. So we have to get out, we have to engage.
Listen, his death and that tragedy is never far from our mind as well. But the reality is that tragedy did fundamentally alter our risk tolerance and calculation throughout the Foreign Service in a way that I think has not always accrued to the benefit of the projection of U.S. influence. And so I say this to all of you. I think Senator Risch and I have had a particular interest in trying to reorder the way in which we do reviews of incidents in the field so as to not be overly punitive of our leadership that often has to make tough decisions to put people in harm's way in order to represent the United States. I'm going to use my prerogative to ask Ambassador Jacobson one last question, which is a sort of a step back question. So you're, a rare breed, having served 3 times as ambassador. You've served at a very difficult time in the Foreign Service, a moment when American foreign policy changes very quickly from administration to administration. It is just an absolute marvel to me, the quality and commitment of the people who work in our embassies, despite the fact that they may be running one mission before an election and asked to do something fundamentally different thereafter. Talk to me about how you try to make sure that we continue to boost and maintain morale amongst the people that you work for you. We teach flexibility and agility to our workforce, even in a moment when from election to election, the mission becomes very, very different. Give us a little advice as to what you've learned during this difficult time as a leader of men and women at 3 different embassies.
Senator, thank you so much for this question. This is really very near and dear to my heart. And when you're someone as long in the tooth as I am, there is no greater privilege or pleasure than supporting the teammates who are rising up through the ranks. So the focus on morale and professional development has really been a hallmark of my career, including during 3 years in a leadership role at the Foreign Service Institute. It's true that we often serve in difficult conditions, war, post-war, illnesses, our families may or may not be with us. And you have to think what motivates people to join the Foreign Service in the first place, and that is a sense of service. I come to this naturally from a military family. Both of my grandparents, my maternal grandparents, served in the British Army during World War II. My sister was married to a Navy pilot. service is in our blood. I think all of my classmates, all of my colleagues here have a similar story. So keeping morale up means keeping focused on why we joined in the first place, the privilege of representing the American people overseas, and also what are the missions that we're striving to achieve. I think one of the most important things that an ambassador does as a facilitator of the team's work is to keep that vision of the overarching goals first and foremost in everybody's mind. If we know what we're about, if we know what we're trying to achieve, if we've organized ourselves as an interagency team, including in collaboration with Congress, to keep our eye on those overarching goals and bring all the different skills and experiences and authorities and resources to achieve those goals, and we make a little bit of progress, that's what motivates people to keep doing the job even when conditions are tough. I could go on, but I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ambassador. Senator Young.
I'm almost encouraged, want to encourage you to go on. I feel like playing some John Philip Sousa music.